Hey, what is going on everybody? It is Rob, aka The Diligent Dev, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at how to make form creation easier in Vue.js. We're going to be looking at two different packages that take two completely different approaches. So what we're going to do is hop over to the computer and get right into it. Okay, so here we are over at the computer, and what I've done is created a Vue project, and when I created it, I chose the default preset. If you don't know how to create a Vue project using their CLI, I will leave a link on the screen right now to a video showing you how to do so. Once it was created, I went ahead and removed everything from our main div here in app.vue. I created two components, one called Vue Formulate and another called Vue Form Generator. If we go ahead and look at those components, you'll see that each one has an H2 tag, and that's all we're displaying on the screen right now. And to get a development server up and running, I went down to my terminal and ran npm run serve. The first form package we're going to be looking at is Vue Formulate. So if we head over to their documentation and we click on Get Started, and we go to Installation, we can go ahead and install this using a variety of different methods. You can either use an npm package, yarn, or you can directly download it. What we're going to do is do an npm install. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, head back over, open another terminal, paste that in, and hit enter. And once it is done installing, I will be right back. Okay, so now that that's installed, let's go ahead and install their styles. So we head back to their documentation, and we click on styling/theming, and then we click on this easily include that CSS on your page. You'll see that they have a default theme, and it is SCSS. I am not using SCSS in my Vue project, so I'm going to click on this link called Vue CSS on GitHub. I'm going to go ahead and copy all of this out, head back to our projects, go to assets, add a new file called formulate.css. And I'm just going to go ahead and paste that in. And what I'm going to do is hit Alt-Shift-F. And that's going to go ahead and format all of the styling so that we could change it in the future if we wanted to. Now let's head back to our main.js. And we need to do two things in here. The first one we're going to do is import the style. So say import assets/formulate.css. And then we also need to add it as a plugin. So we'll go back to their documentation. We'll go back, and up here at the top, you'll see add to Vue. So it says import Vue from Vue, then we import Formulate, then we tell Vue to use Formulate as a plugin. So what I'm going to do is copy these two, because in our main.js file, we already have import Vue from Vue. I'm going to head back here, and right under this, I'm going to go ahead and paste that in and save everything. So next we're going to head back to their documentation, and then we're going to click on Getting Started. And you'll see that they give you a little information here. And the big thing that you need to take away from this is there are only two components that need to be learned, and that is the formulate input and the formulate form. So if we look at inputs, you'll see they have the formulate input. This one is a type of text, and the type is equivalent to the native HTML. So you can specify anything that you would want to specify there in native HTML. They have a text area. Looks like they have an email, and they have a little bit of validation on this. They have a required and email. They talk about model binding, and on the formulate inputs, you can use a vModel per input, and we're not going to do that because I'll show you an easier way to do it here coming up. They talk about double binding. They talk about array binding. You can set the type as a checkbox, and then you can specify your options here. And you'll see that they have a nice demo here. And if we click one, you'll see that the values do change inside of the array. But what we're going to be talking about is form binding. And what's really nice about this is you don't have to write a whole lot of data properties inside of your script tag, because you can just do a vModel on the form values and specify the name of each input, and the form values will reference that. So if we go ahead and take a look, you'll see that in here is where the data property form values would be. And if we start typing things out like Rob, and how old am I? I'm 34. You'll see that it starts populating this vModel of form values. So what we're going to be doing in this example is coding a sign up form for a user. So what we're going to do is head back to our project, and we're going to go to our Vue Formulate component. So inside of our template tag, right underneath our H2, we're going to add a formulate form tag. We're going to give it two properties. The first is going to be vModel, and we're going to set that equal to form values. And the next one is going to bind to the submit property, and we're going to say handle submit. Down here in our export default, we'll add our data property. And inside of there, we will specify the form values that we referenced above. And we'll set that equal to an empty object. And then below our data property, we will make a methods property. And we'll create our handle submit method. Inside of our formulate form, we'll add our first form input. So we're going to say formulate input. We'll self-close this. We'll give it a name equal to name for the name of our user, a label of name, and a validation equal to required. We'll go ahead and save this, and you'll see now we have our text input with a label of name. And like I said earlier, the only thing you have to know is the formulate form tag and the formulate input. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy and paste this because we're going to have 7 fields that the user is required to fill out before they proceed. Our second field is going to be email. So in front of everything, we're going to give it a type of email. We're going to specify that the name is equal to email and do the same thing with the label. And then we're going to say that the validation is that it's required, and we're going to add a pipe because we're going to add a second validation called email. Next, we're going to have a username. So we're going to give it a name of username and a label of username. And we're also going to say that it is required. The next one is password. So in front of name, we're going to say type equals password because we do not want to display the password in the text field. We're going to give it a name of password, a label of password, and we're also going to make it required. Next, we're going to do a select list for the user to select their favorite programming language. So in front of name, we're going to say type equals select, name equals favorite language, label equals favorite language. I'm going to hit Alt-Shift-F to format that, and it'll give it to me on separate lines. We're not going to say that this one is required, but what we're going to do is pass it some options. And this is going to be an object. First, we'll say JavaScript. Next, we'll say Vue.js. CSS3, and HTML5. And I know that those aren't technically programming languages, but just stick with me here. Next, we're going to have a checkbox for the user to accept terms. So we're going to come to this. We're going to say type equals checkbox. We're going to give it a name of accept terms and a label of accept terms. We're going to say that the validation is required on this one. The next thing we're going to do is come down to this input. We're going to give it a type of submit for our button. We're going to remove the name from it. We're going to give it a label of sign up. And we're going to take the validation off of it as well. And it looks like I lied. We're not going to have that many inputs, so I'm going to go ahead and delete this one and then save everything. Now to display what is actually coming out of our form values, I'm going to go below our formulate form. I'm going to give it an H3 and set that equal to values. And then below our H3, we're just going to do some interpolation and display our form values. I'm gonna hit Alt-Shift-F to format everything and save it once again. And you'll see now that we have our values appearing underneath the form. So if I was to try to submit this right now, our form validation would fire. So we have requireds on all these fields. This one requires a valid email address, username, password, and the accept terms is required. So let's go ahead and fill this out. We'll say diligent. We'll give it an email of the diligent dev@gmail.com. And you'll see that that's the form validation has disappeared. But if I was to back out here, you'll see that it requires a valid email address, and it's recognizing that this is not a valid email address. So until I put the .com on it, we're still going to get validations that fire. Give it a username of the diligent dev, a password, and you'll see that the password is not displayed in the password field. And as we're filling this out, you'll see that our values are being displayed down here. We'll select a favorite language, and then we'll go ahead and select the terms, and this would allow us to sign up. So what we need to do is go down to our handle submit, and all I'm going to do is console log form values, this.form values. Going to go ahead and save everything, and I'm just going to go ahead and just fill this out real quick. We're going to go ahead and open up our console, and if we hit sign up, we see that our form values are displayed in the console. So as you can see, Vue Formulate makes it extremely easy to add forms to your projects, and you can do it really, really quickly. And the next package we're going to look at is the Vue Form Generator. So I'm going to go ahead and close out of this, go to my File Explorer, and we're going to open up the Vue Form Generator component, and let's go check out their documentation. So in their getting started, it shows you a form. It gives you the model output of the form. There's a demo you can go look at and a little bit more information, but we're interested in installing it right now. So let's go to installation, and you'll see that they have an NPM package. So we're just going to go ahead and copy that. We're going to head back to our terminal, paste that in, and once that's done installing, I will be right back. And now that the Vue Form Generator has been installed, let's go back to their documentation and go to usage, and you'll see that we can register it with Vue. So we're going to go ahead and copy these, come back to our project, go to main.js, and right below this, we're going to go ahead and paste those lines right in. And we'll go ahead and save this. And then we'll head back to our Vue Form Generator component. Now, if we go back to their documentation and we click on component, you'll see that the Vue Form Generator has a Vue Form Generator component that we can use. You will have to specify a schema, a model, and options. So what we're gonna do is go ahead and just copy this out. We're going to head back, and right underneath our H2, we're gonna go ahead and paste that in. I'm gonna hit Alt-Shift-F to format and minimize this. So inside the Vue Form Generator component, we're going to have to specify something called a schema. So if we go back to their documentation and we look at the schema, it says that the schema contains the fields of the form optionally in groups, and it gives you a simple example without groups. You'll specify a field array, and inside of that array, you'll put your different input types in there. They also give you a simple form with groups. You can see you can group your fields with a legend inside of the form. And then they say it is possible to have a schema with grouped and some ungrouped. Over here on the left, if we click on fields, you'll see that you can specify a type, label, and model. And they have some core fields here and some optional fields. We're not going to get a whole lot into the optional fields, but we're going to take a look at some of the core fields that are associated with this. Next, if we go back and look at the components, you'll see that we also have to specify a model. So if we come back and we scroll down, we see that there is a model, and your model acts as the vModel and allows us to pull the data that people are inputting into the form out of it for saving in a database or any other operations that you might be performing. If we head back, we can look to see that there's also form options. So if we head back over to the documentation and click on options, You'll see that we have a validate after load. This executes validation after the model is loaded, or essentially when the page is loaded. Validate after change will execute validations after every change on your model. And then there's a field ID prefix, and you can prefix your fields with an ID. So let's go ahead and head back and start building out our form. So the first thing we're going to do is come back to our export defaults. We're going to add a data property. And inside of our data property, the first thing we're going to specify is the model. It's going to be an object. And we know the fields that we're going to have, they are on the right side of the screen. So we'll say name, email, username, password, favorite language, and accept terms. Next, under model, we will specify our schema. This will be an object, and inside of this we'll have fields, and this will be an array. Our first object inside of fields will be our name input, so it's going to have a type of input. The input type is going to be text. Label is going to be name. The model is also going to be name, which has to match our name inside of our model right here. And then we're going to make it required, and we're going to set that to true. Since we're going to be using almost the exact same object, I'm going to go ahead and copy this and paste it below. And we're going to change some things in here. The type will still be input. The input type is going to be email for this field. The label will be email. The model will be email. We're going to require it, and we're also going to add a placeholder. And we'll set the placeholder to email at test.com. We'll go ahead and paste again. This is going to be input again. The input type is going to stay text. We're going to make the label username. We'll make the model username, and we will also require this field. We'll go ahead and paste again. The type will stay input. The input type on this one is going to be password. This will be for our password field. We're going to give it a label of password. We'll specify the name of our model as password. We're going to require it. We're also going to give it a min of 6 to specify that we want at least 6 characters inside of it. We'll give it a hint of minimum or min of 6 characters. And we're going to set the validator on this equal to string, since we're validating a string inside of this input. Next, we're going to paste in again. We're going to say that the input type on this is select. We'll go ahead and remove the input type. We will set the label to favorite language. We will set the model to favorite language. We will not require this, but we are going to set a values property on this, set it to an array, and inside of this array, we'll declare JavaScript, Vue.js, CSS3, and HTML5. Under this, we will paste again. The type is going to be submit. We're going to declare a function right here, and the function is going to be on submit. We're going to pass in the model, and then we will be handling our logic for submissions inside of this. We'll leave the label blank. We will specify button text and set that to sign up. And we're going to give it one more field of validates before submit. And we're going to set that to true. And you'll see we're getting a red squiggly because we never use model. So on submit, we're going to console.log, and we will log the model. The last thing we're going to do is come down here after this bracket and specify our form options. This takes an object. We're going to say validate after load, and we're going to set this to false because we do not want to validate on page load. We're going to set validate after change and set this to true because I do want to validate after a model property has changed. And then we're going to say validate async and also set that to true. I'm going to hit Alt-Shift-F to format, go ahead and save this. And you'll see now down here we have name, email, username, password, and it's saying min of 6 characters on the password and asking of a favorite language. And you'll see that our form is not looking great, and that's because I forgot to do one thing. If we come back to their documentation and we look at installation, you'll see that we needed to import this CSS style sheet. So we're going to head back, go to main.js, and right under Vue Form Generator, we're going to go ahead and import that. And you'll see now that our form looks a little bit better. Another thing I want to do is underneath of our form, I want to go ahead and display our model. I'm going to give it an H3 and say values. And then underneath our H3, we're just going to do some interpolation and say model, hit save, and you'll see now that our model is being displayed underneath of our form. So let's go ahead and test out our form. If we click the sign up button, it looks like only one field is validating, so let's go ahead and take a look. And it looks like I missed the validator on these other fields. So what we'll do is we'll come up to the name input, we'll put the validator is string, come to our email, and we're actually going to say the validator is email on this. We'll come to our username and say that the validator is string on that. And it looks like I missed our checkbox. So let's go ahead and create that. We're going to go ahead and just copy one of these. So we'll copy this one right here. I'm going to come down, and before our submit button, I'm going to go ahead and paste that in. It's going to be a type of checkbox. The input type we can remove. The label will be accept terms. The model will be accept terms. It will be required, and I don't believe that we need a validator, but I'm going to check that. So we'll go ahead. Actually, we need to add one more property here. The default needs to be set to false. There we go. We'll go ahead and save this, and then we'll go ahead and click sign up, and that is still not validating. So let's go ahead and look at their documentation. So after a little bit of research, I figured out that the validator on this needs to be set to required. We're going to go ahead and save this. And now we can see that all of our form fields are firing their validations. If we go ahead and put in a name, username, specify a password, and accept terms, and hit sign up, and then we open the console, you'll see that an object was logged, and we have our model right there. So that's going to go ahead and wrap up this tutorial of how to more easily create forms using these two Vue packages. If you got any value out of this, I would really appreciate it if you hit that like and subscribe button. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, go ahead and drop them in the comment section below. And until next time, happy coding.